In a world where connections often felt like a game of chess, I found myself entangled in a web of toxic relationships that drained my energy and clouded my judgment. It wasn't until a particularly exhausting encounter that I realized the extent of the toxicity surrounding me. I had always been the kind of person who sought to please others, often at the expense of my own well-being. But as I stood there, listening to the sharp words of a friend who had become more of a critic than a companion, something inside me snapped. I knew I had to change my approach to relationships, not only to protect myself, but also to cultivate genuine connections that would enrich my life. The first step on this journey was acknowledging the toxicity. I began to reflect on my interactions, scrutinizing the patterns that had emerged. There were those who thrived on manipulation, wielding guilt like a weapon, and others who seemed to revel in drama, leaving chaos in their wake. I realized that I had allowed these individuals to dictate the terms of my relationships, often sidelining my own needs and desires. It was a bitter pill to swallow, recognizing that I had played a part in perpetuating this cycle. Yet, this acknowledgement became my catalyst for change. Armed with newfound awareness, I set out to establish boundaries. It felt foreign and uncomfortable at first, as if I were learning a new language. I practiced saying no, not just to the toxic individuals, but also to the habits that had enabled their behavior. I began to prioritize my mental health, carving out time for self-care and reflection. This process was not linear. There were moments of doubt and fear, especially when I confronted those who had long taken advantage of my kindness. But with each boundary I set, I felt a surge of empowerment. I was no longer a passive player in the game. I was taking control of my own narrative. As I distanced myself from toxic relationships, I began to explore what I truly wanted in my connections with others. I sought out individuals who inspired me, who encouraged growth rather than stifling it. I reached out to old friends with whom I had lost touch, rekindling bonds that had been overshadowed by negativity. It was a revelation to discover the joy of authentic relationships, where laughter came easily and conversations flowed without the weight of judgment. I learned to appreciate the beauty of vulnerability, recognizing that true connections are built on trust and mutual respect. This journey was not without its challenges. There were moments when I felt the pull of old habits, the temptation to revert to my accommodating ways. I encountered resistance from those who were accustomed to my compliance, and their reactions ranged from confusion to outright hostility. I realized that outsmarting toxic people was not merely about evading their influence. It was also about standing firm in my newfound identity. I had to learn to navigate these encounters with grace, refusing to engage in their games while remaining steadfast in my resolve. Through this process, I discovered the importance of self-compassion. I had been my harshest critic, often berating myself for perceived failures in relationships. But as I embraced my journey, I learned to forgive myself for past mistakes. Building stronger connections required patience, both with myself and with others. I began to celebrate small victories, whether it was successfully setting a boundary or having a meaningful conversation with a friend. Each step forward reinforced my belief that I was worthy of healthy relationships. As I continued to cultivate positive connections, I became more attuned to the dynamics of my interactions. I learned to identify red flags early on, recognizing behaviors that signaled potential toxicity. This awareness allowed me to make informed choices about who I invited into my life. I found myself gravitating toward individuals who shared my values and aspirations, who challenged me to be better while also providing support. These relationships blossomed, enriching my life in ways I had never anticipated. Perhaps the most profound lesson I learned was the power of communication. I had often shied away from difficult conversations, fearing confrontation or rejection. However, as I began to express my feelings and needs openly, I discovered that vulnerability could be a strength. Honest dialogue fostered deeper connections, allowing me to share my experiences and hear the stories of others. I learned that everyone carries their own burdens, and by being open, I created space for empathy and understanding. With time, I began to see the fruits of my labor. My social circle transformed, filled with individuals who lifted me up rather than tearing me down. I found joy in shared experiences, in laughter that echoed without the sting of sarcasm. I reveled in the knowledge that I had outsmarted the toxicity that had once threatened to consume me. The journey was ongoing, a continuous process of growth and self-discovery, but I felt equipped to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Looking back, I realized that the journey of transforming my connections was not solely about eliminating toxic people. It was about nurturing the relationships that truly mattered. I learned to appreciate the beauty of connection, understanding that it thrives in an environment of respect, trust, and authenticity. Each relationship became a reflection of my own growth, a testament to the strength I had discovered within myself. In the end, the challenge of outsmarting toxic people became a powerful catalyst for building a life filled with meaningful connections. I emerged from the experience not just as a survivor of toxic dynamics, but as an advocate for healthy relationships. I learned that while I could not control the actions of others, I could control how I responded, and in that realization, I found my freedom. A freedom to choose the people I surrounded myself with and the kind of relationships I wanted to cultivate.